Hey everyone, Kaiju consultant Kevin Carpenter here. After 25 episodes, Gorilla Whale has made it to the end of another era of Godzilla. So before we delve into the Millennium Era, we want to let you know that Gorilla Whale will be going on a brief summer hiatus. So while we're on break, be sure to check out our Ko-fi, as we'll be working to put up more Gorilla Whale bonus episodes while we're away. Every bit of your support helps, even if that support is just telling your friends about that cool Godzilla podcast you listen to. You can check out our Ko-fi through the link in the description or at ko-fi.com/Digital Kaiju Studios. But before we take our break, we're going to leave you with an extra-length episode covering one of the most infamous Godzilla movies. That's right, folks, we're finally here. Get ready for Godzilla 1998. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gorilla Whale, a Godzilla watch-along podcast. I am your kaiju consultant, Kevin Carpenter.
And I am stating the obvious, Kayla Knutson.
That's a lot of fish.
That's a lot of fish, Kevin.
Today, folks, we are talking about the black sheep of the Godzilla franchise, at least the most popular black sheep. We already talked about All Monsters Attack. We talked about the Godzilla Power Hour. And now we are talking about Godzilla. Specifically, the American version of Godzilla. The second try. Godzilla 1998 by TriStar Studios. Oh boy.
Kevin, this is a really awkward situation for me. I tend to take a harsher stance on these Godzilla movies than you do because I don't have the attachment. However, we're getting to the point where people that have made these movies are still alive and working in Hollywood. And, you know, I'm out here trying to be in the mix on these things. I won't lie. And it's bad form to simply... I'm walking a tightrope, Kevin.
I love this scenario
what if
you
Dean
have.
Devlin finds this podcast and is upset that I criticized a movie from over 25 years ago and is like, you can't be hired on Leverage Season 4 as a writer, because obviously in this hypothetical scenario, I'm suddenly in the mix for Leverage Redemption Season 4.
That was one of the funniest things to find in my research, by the way, that Dean Devlin directed like a good chunk of episodes for Leverage, your favorite TV show.
He's an executive producer. He's the co-showrunner.
Also, apparently, one of Gorilla Whale's biggest fans, according to this scenario.
According to this scenario, Dean Devlin has secretly been following along with Gorilla Whale and is like, oh boy, let's see if Kayla passed this test. Listen, I don't want to, I don't want to compromise
my favorite
integrity.
podcaster, Kayla Knutson, is finally covering one of my movies. And
I knew we would get here. Like, I knew we would get to this point where I would start feeling... Because, like, it's not like you can't criticize... It's not like you can't be out here kind of criticizing, but it is considered bad form to just, like, to be, like, a creative in Hollywood and then just shit-talking, like, other creatives. It's just kind of rude. And also because, like, you know how hard it is to get, like, a movie made. And it's not saying, like, you can't have criticisms, but if your job's not like a critic, you don't really do it because you don't want to insult people that you might want to work with at some point. So we will be walking a tightrope here. I will be walking a tightrope here of being more polite but not compromising my integrity as a film critic, because that is technically what I'm doing.
So I'm not going to be doing that. And this is why I do the historical context research on these movies, because I want to be able to point out why these movies, at least some of these movies, suck. And with the previous Godzilla movies, it's like, hey, there was a good concept, but the studio only gave them a year to do it. So this is why this is bad. And also all these other reasons. Godzilla 1998, I've come prepared. All of those other times where I'm like, oh, here's one quote where the director said, yeah, you know, the Godzilla movies are fine, but I'm not that big of a fan of them. But, you know, I'm going to give it my best shot. You know, you saw how angry I was at that. Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, hey, the two that are listening to this podcast right now, because I know that you're super fans, fuck you guys. All right? I'm coming for you this episode. I've got the receipts. So let's do this.
This is an interesting role reversal that could be happening here.
So Godzilla, by the way, I'm very excited for this episode because we have a few shorts that we put out from these podcast episodes. And by the way, if you're listening to this on a podcaster, that's great. Check out the Digital Kaiju Studios YouTube or TikTok page as we post shorts from these episodes on there as well. We get comments on some of the shorts where we're more critical of these movies than we usually are. And we get a lot of comments that are basically like, no, all Godzilla movies are great. Asterisk, except for this one.
Yeah, they always say, well, I'll be like, some Godzilla movies are better than others. Some of them are kind of bad. And then people will be like, no, all of them are good, except for Son of Godzilla and the TriStars. And I'm like, so you mean to say that some of them are not good? Like, it's okay. You know, here's the thing, Kevin. I come from the Star Wars fandom, so nothing can hurt me. I have been in the trenches. You want to get pedantic, bitches? Let's go. I like that I'm antagonizing our listener base and at the same time being like, you know, Dean Devlin, you tried your best.
Yeah, I love that this is the movie where you're pulling your punches. Okay.
I'm not. We'll see.
Here we go. Historical context for Godzilla 1998, the first American feature film Godzilla. Not the first attempt, that was the Godzilla Power Hour. So attempting to create a Godzilla film in America was apparently a hard sell, especially because the most widely seen version of Godzilla in America at that time was a 40-something minute recut of Godzilla vs. Megalon, hosted by John Belushi. So that's sort of the greater cultural zeitgeist for Godzilla at the time. Remember, we covered
John
that in
Belushi?
Yeah, we covered that in the Godzilla vs. Megalon episode.
I have the memory of a hamster on Ritalin.
What a metaphor. So this movie would go through several versions. Originally, Jan de Bont, the director of Speed and Twister, was set to direct Godzilla.
Great films.
But in his version, Godzilla wouldn't be a product of nuclear radiation. Instead, he would be an artificial creation of the Atlanteans, set to defend the Earth from a chimeric monster known as the Griffin. So great monster concept. However, no one would sign off on his budget, so Jan de Bont left the project. And then later, on November 2018, an unofficial graphic novel of this concept was released online called Godzilla 94. So you can actually read an illustrated version of this original concept. So that's very cool.
I hate the idea of Godzilla not being the result of nuclear radiation. It feels pretty integral to who he is. However, this as a separate monster movie would be pretty cool, I think.
Apparently Toho also agreed. I'll cover the Godzilla Bible in just a minute. But before we get there, so the American Godzilla is in development hell. We covered this in our previous episodes, but they thought that it would be out around Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. And then they're like, oh, well, they're taking their sweet time. Let's make a few more Godzillas. So TriStar Studios would eventually bring on Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin, who had just made a killing off the movie Independence Day. Unfortunately, these people had some odd ideas about Godzilla. Here's the receipts. From the Los Angeles Times, January 18th, 1998. To fully background himself in the character, Emmerich watched 14 or 15 of the Toho Godzilla movies on Laserdisc. He then said, "Then I gave up. It's just the same movie over and over again. They always had another monster in it, and I never get anything out of two monsters fighting. For reasons I can't explain myself, kids all over the world kept watching these movies."
Okay, so once again, we are having somebody who is not a fan of Godzilla be at the helm of a Godzilla movie.
Correct.
Interesting.
Dean Devlin, in Star Ledger newspaper, it'll look like Godzilla, but be more realistic. More to the lizard genesis than just a big fat guy in a rubber suit. Hey, don't like that disrespect toward the Godzilla suit actors, especially as we've covered in this podcast multiple times, that they put their lives on the line.
Their life on the line!
And Patrick Tatopoulos, who was the production designer for the movie, said in Time magazine, "We were creating an animal. We weren't creating a monster." So you're working on the King of the Monsters movie, and you're specifically not creating a monster. These guys were in charge of the American Godzilla, and they had negotiated complete creative control over TriStar and Toho.
How did... Oh, because Independence Day made a fuck ton of money, that's why.
Independence Day made so much money.
Independence Day slaps.
Yeah, the running theory is that Toho agreed to this because it was basically free money for them. They were like, well, it's an American Godzilla. If it sucks, they can't really blame us. And if it rocks, we're going to be making some Independence Day money.
Listen, that's a good business decision.
Yeah. And meanwhile, TriStar, like I said, this movie was in development hell. So
yeah.
It was like Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin were apparently the only directors that they could get. And only if Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin could exercise complete creative control, which is madness. Nuts.
I think that part of the reason why they were struggling to find directors is because this is the 90s and we have the independent movie boom happening in the 90s. Like, there was a ton of really great films in the 90s. Many of them lower budget indies that were breaking out and doing really well. Franchises had not completely taken over. You had like a few big franchise movies. Well, I guess Jurassic Park was an IP movie, and then it would become a franchise. That was like 93, and the second one probably came out in the 90s too.
Yeah.
That's Steven Spielberg is putting his time and attention. Like, if I off the top of my head, Steven Spielberg would probably be the director that I would most go to for a Godzilla film in the 90s in America. But he's probably busy, and I wonder if he was approached. Like, I wonder if he had any interest in it.
I did not encounter anything like that in my research, but you can tell in this movie that Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin wanted to be Steven Spielberg a little bit, and we'll cover that later in the summary.
I definitely felt Independence Day's fingerprints all over this movie for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And there was also,
yeah.
I also felt Jurassic Park's fingerprints all over this movie.
And that's what I mean by they wanted to be Steven Spielberg for part of this movie.
Yeah, who amongst us doesn't want to be Steven Spielberg?
Yeah. So Toho agreed to the complete creative control for the reasons I outlined just a few moments ago. But they also gave them a 75-page Godzilla Bible, listing some Godzilla commandments to keep the brand together.
75 pages?
According to reports, it was like 75 pages of the Godzilla brand Bible. Notably, some of these commandments: Godzilla must be the result of a nuclear explosion. So they agree with you on that front, Kayla. Godzilla must have 4 claws on its hands and feet. That was not followed for this movie. Godzilla must have 3 rows of dorsal fins along its spine. Not followed. Godzilla cannot die. So not even Toho is following that one.
Yeah.
And the source of Kayla's most hated Godzilla rule: Godzilla cannot eat people.
Really appreciated that. Like, listen, I told my roommate, I paused this movie halfway through watching it, walked over into my roommate's room, and I was like, this film, I've got some issues, but also it's really going after some of the things that I have been harping about for the last 20-something movies here. And for that, I must commend it.
Godzilla's eating people, finally. There's a...
You can understand my confliction here, right? Like, you can understand why I'm gnawing on this movie like it's a bone. But it's like a bone that it makes my stomach hurt a little, but I can't stop. It's like you can't, like, you're not supposed to give your dog chicken bones or something because it's bad for them. They're too brittle. It might perforate their stomach or something. I'm like a Rottweiler with a Costco chicken.
So we have a bunch of people who don't like Godzilla and don't want to listen to Toho, and they're given complete creative control over a Godzilla film. And we see how that turns out on May 20th, 1998, when Godzilla releases.
Whew.
So for reasons that I will get to later, I will be referring to the giant monster in the movie Godzilla as Zilla. As in the modern day, that is the official terminology for this monster.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I understand why. It's because he looks completely different from every other Godzilla that's came before him. I like the design of his head.
Yeah. Well, he used to be called Gino.
What?
Godzilla in name only.
Oh. Okay.
So let's get into it. We begin on yellow-tinted footage of iguanas witnessing nuclear tests in... Hang on, let me check my notes. Ah, yes, French Polynesia. That's right. In this movie, Zilla was made not by the Americans and not by the Soviets, but by the French.
Because the French is the most comedy nationality. French is a comedy nationality in America.
We cut over to a Japanese fishing vessel. Suddenly, the ship is attacked by a giant creature. Only one man survives, and later, all he can say about the incident is a single traumatized word. Gojira. Gojira. We cut over to Matthew Broderick, Dr. Nick Tatopoulos, who is busy in Chernobyl studying the effects of radiation on worms. There's a running gag where people mispronounce his last name, and fun fact, he was named after the production designer for this film, Patrick Tatopoulos. Anyway, the US military sweeps in and tells Dr. Nick that he's being reassigned. Dr. Nick is taken to Panama, where he is shown giant reptilian footprints amidst a trail of destruction. He also meets red-headed paleontologist Elsie Chapman, who immediately starts hitting on him. But even though she's cool, she is not the love interest.
I am begging. The fact that I can count on one hand how many well-written women are in a Godzilla franchise. And listen, it's Matthew Broderick. He's cute. It's not like, oh, this woman having a crush on him immediately makes her a poorly written character. The character work in this film in general, though, Godzilla has never been subtle. And this film lacks any sense of subtlety at all. And it almost feels like this is a film that I'm not sure who it was made for, because on the one hand, it seems like this would be a movie that would be very, very easy for young children to follow because of the way that the dialogue is done. It's very similar to how you do dialogue and things targeted at young people, like young kids.
But specifically children who are bored by two monsters fighting.
Yes. And which it's a Venn diagram. It's a small one, but it's a Venn diagram. And also, though, it does feel kind of like a movie that you might use to help people learn English, because everything is very obvious. They're not masking anything here. Everybody is saying exactly how they feel all of the time. And exactly what is on the very top of their head all of the time. And so it's kind of like if you were, and that's what I mean, is the dialogue, I think, is very easy to follow because they're just saying what's on their face. And so if you were trying to learn English, it would be kind of easy because you're not parsing out meanings. Because like when I was learning Spanish in high school, we always watched kids' movies in Spanish because they're simpler, they're easier, and more often people are saying kind of what they mean because you're trying to make sure that this audience that is learning how to watch movies is keeping up. So this is a movie to teach people how to watch a movie if they haven't seen a lot of movies, maybe.
This is a movie for people who don't watch movies.
I don't understand what was going on here. I really liked Independence Day.
I miss Tomoko so much.
I miss Tomoko.
I miss Tomoko. If you want to learn about Tomoko, listen to episode 13, Godzilla vs. Gigan. We love her. She's great.
The very first conversation that they have, Chapman and Tatapopoulos, is that's what I said, in the car with a bunch of other people. She's like, do you have a girlfriend? I will be your girlfriend.
No, it's the second conversation. The first conversation oh, he's here now. Oh, wait, he's cute. And then the second conversation is, hey, let me just reiterate, you're cute and I want to date you. And that's it.
Listen, in real life, this sort of straightforwardness is appreciated and might be attractive to some people. You know, I mean, some people, maybe they don't like that, whatever. In a film, though, you know, generally, it's a little more cat and mouse.
Yeah.
A little bit more tension surrounding that situation. It is interesting that this movie does include a love triangle, like the first movie, you know.
Well, it's not even a love triangle. Elsie Chapman, her first thing and her second thing on screen is to tell Matthew Broderick that she thinks he's cute. And then nothing happens with that for the rest of the movie. They have one other conversation after Dr. Nick gets fired from the military. Spoiler alert, folks, for people who are following along with this movie through entirely listening to these episodes. And Matthew Broderick, Dr. Nick, is like, hey, make sure the military doesn't fuck this up. And then that's like it. Elsie Chapman, it like has the beginnings of a great character, and then they do nothing with her.
And then she accidentally kisses the guy that is not supposed to be attractive on the team. And she's like, oh no, as if now she has to be in a relationship with him against her will. The comedy of the 90s sometimes.
Yeah.
This movie, you know what this movie felt like?
This movie felt pre 9/11.
This movie was definitely pre 9/11. I wrote multiple times, that's not what would happen, and we know that now. We know that now, that's not how buildings. That's not what happens to buildings. The building that was still standing that just had a giant hole in it.
Yeah. We know that's not how it works anymore.
Watching this movie after growing up watching 9/11 footage, fascinating.
There's a point later in this movie where Godzilla's rampaging, and then someone is like, this is the worst disaster to hit New York since the World Trade Center bombing. And it's like... Ugh.
Yeah, but there's like a pause in between World Trade Center and bombing. That made me like flinch a little. I'm so sorry. This podcast episode is going to be 2 hours long and full of tangents.
Yeah. We're going to be here.
Break it up now, folks. If you got a long drive and you're watching this right now and you're not like on some long, it's okay to pause this and then come back to this when you have to clean your entire apartment. We're going to be here for a second.
Okay. So Elsie Chapman, the character who has three character traits. Paleontologist, redhead, crush on Dr. Nick. We're not doing anything with any of those. No. Dr. Nick.
Oh, she's kind of mean. She's kind of mean and snarky.
She's kind of mean and snarky. She's
not
fun.
Enough, though.
She's fun.
Yeah, no. In a good way. In a good way.
Yeah.
But, like, that's her introduction. She's like, blah, 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 blah. And then she sees that Matthew Broderick is cute. And she's like, he's cute.
Exactly.
And isn't, like, snarky to him, but is snarky to everybody else. It's all very...
Everyone in this movie wants Matthew Broderick. including Zilla.
This is so funny to me. Everybody is just after Ferris Bueller.
Should I just call him Matthew Broderick for the rest of this movie, or should I go by his character name, Dr. Nick? Because both are funny.
Well, technically, wouldn't it be Dr. Tatapopoulos?
Dr. Tatopoulos.
Tatopoulos. It would be Dr. Tatopoulos. I can't fault this movie for making a cheap joke out of his last name because I'm doing it. So, it's just such a thing in so many movies, especially slightly older movies, that everybody wants the main character guy. Like, the male main character is incredibly attractive, and all women introduced in the film lust after him.
And the choice of Matthew Broderick makes that a little strange. He's a guy. He's guy of all time.
I just simply don't understand, like, why that happens, you know? Like, why is it that all of the women in a movie exist to demonstrate how attractive, and it often will happen with a kind of nerdy character.
Yeah.
And it just makes me feel like the writers are working something out about their youth and perhaps adult. Like, Joss Whedon does this a lot.
Yeah. The entire character of Xander and Buffy the Vampire Slayer is just Joss Whedon being like, and here's the nice guy that gets ignored by the cute girl.
Yeah. And I think that Matthew Broderick's dialogue in this movie is supposed to be, he states the obvious a lot, and I think it's supposed to be humorous. It's supposed to be kind of a deadpan humor, but he doesn't really, he delivers it very earnestly, which it does not quite work.
Mm-hmm.
Based off of his, you could make that dialogue work. You could make it work better than what's happening in this movie. But the delivery is far too earnest.
Yeah, no, he's the geeky scientist character with the special interest, and when he goes into a drugstore, he's asking for pregnancy tests, but he's, like, specifically calling out the chemicals that he needs to the drugstore clerk, like, oh, haha, he's like Jimmy Neutron, like, kind of thing, sodium chloride instead of salt. But you are right in that one of his main character traits is his earnestness. Like, he's earnest, he's just genuine throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of the lines call for more of a deadpan delivery.
Yeah.
There's a rumor that Matthew Broderick signed up for this movie before reading the script because he just wanted to be in a Godzilla movie. So always read the script, folks.
Yeah, it feels like there's a clash happening between the direction, the script, and the acting. I do earnestly think that there is, like, that this movie does have the basis, and I've said this for many of the other Godzilla films. This isn't just me trying to be, soft on this one because I want to work on Dean Devlin's shows or whatever. There is a base foundation for what could have been a really banging Godzilla movie, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit more as we go through the plots. But I don't know kind of what happened here with some of the dialogue and some of the character direction and stuff. And again, it's not, the characters are not particularly deep or complex. This is something that happens in many Godzilla movies, though. So they are just following tradition.
This is Independence Day as Godzilla. This is a disaster movie. And in disaster movies, the characters are there to witness the disaster and run from it. You're not really there for the characters themselves. You're there to root for the characters as they run away from the tidal wave or the earthquake, or in this case, the giant lizard.
I believe that you should the character, even if it is a disaster movie, to me, I'm like, character is first and foremost. And spectacle is fine. Like, again, I like Independence Day. Like, spectacle is, you're there to have fun, etc. But we've had so many good disaster movies that have really great character work going on. Twister had great character stuff going on here and great relationships.
I agree with you. In a disaster movie, you need to care about the characters, but they forget that. No one ever says the characters don't matter when the characters are good.
It's the defense of, well, you're just here for the spectacle. Only ever happens when the character work is a little lacking.
So speaking of lacking characters, Elsie Chapman, who is hitting on Dr. Nick, she's not the love interest. Dr. Nick's real love interest is his ex-girlfriend, Audrey Timmons, an assistant at Channel 12 News in New York. Audrey wants to become a reporter, but her boss, Charles Kamen, won't promote her unless she sleeps with him. If she wants to achieve her dreams, she'll have to cover a big story by herself.
Also, spoiler alert, Nick and Audrey broke up because they were college sweethearts. Nick proposed to her. I just feel like I want to cover this ahead of time.
No, I'm going to get into that. There is going to be a moment where I dial down on the details here of this relationship because there's a moment where it's like her character just stops working.
Yeah, we'll get to that then, I guess. Stay tuned.
So Dr. Nick is taken to the wreckage of the fishing vessel that Zilla destroyed. It washed ashore in Jamaica. So after uncovering some skin samples, he deduces that the creature is not a dinosaur that emerged from some unknown hole. That'd be ridiculous. This creature must be a new type of animal that has been mutated by radiation.
I appreciate that it's not actually the lost dinosaur. I hate the lost dinosaur thing because we would see
You don't like the Godzillasaurus?
we would see the ecological impact. First off, it's just not scientifically possible that a dinosaur would survive to now times from a bajillion years ago. And I know that we're dealing with nuclear radiation turning an iguana into a giant fuck off monster, but you only get so many buy-ins. So I prefer the Godzilla is a normal animal from our time that has been mutated by the effects of humanity into being a giant monster that has come for revenge. Because I feel like when it is a dinosaur that was left over from the extinction event, it feels less like... somehow to me, it feels like it takes away some of the human responsibility for Godzilla if it's already this like big creature that isn't supposed to exist in this timeline. It almost feels like it's an actual, like some sort of course correction of fate, that it would then become a giant monster that has to be killed by humanity because it was like left over from a previous time period. When it's something that is supposed to exist now, which is when it's not something that's left over from an earlier era, it feels more like we're actually talking about the impacts of humanity on now.
So at the wreckage, we also meet Philippe Rocher. Take two on that French name. Everyone calls him Roach. I'm trying to pronounce his name the way he pronounces it, but I suck at French accents. So at the wreckage, we also meet Philippe Roche, who introduces himself as an insurance rep, but he is secretly a member of the French Secret Service. Philippe is investigating the Trail of Destruction and hopes to take care of this whole giant monster problem before it comes back to bite France in the ass. Because remember, Zilla in this movie is French Polynesian.
Yes. And also, them naming he's not evil, but he is kind of an antagonistic, menacing sort of force. Like, he's presented and meant to be read as menacing and sinister, and of course they name him Roach. And also the evil reporter boss guy is Cayman, like a Cayman lizard. Like, again, everything is we are not about subtlety here at Godzilla 1998. We are telling you exactly what's going on at all times.
So Zilla sinks more boats on his journey to the city that never sleeps.
Which is what
New York, baby.
The Chiron literally, it does not say New York. It says the city that never sleeps, which was a fascinating choice.
Well, they also go out of their way to specify that it will be raining the entire week at New York. And I wonder if certain special effects look better when it's dark and rainy.
Oh, absolutely. And that's okay. Like, that's like, to be very clear, Godzilla, the original Godzilla, looks better in black and white than a lot of the colored Godzillas that followed. So using environmental effects to make your effects look better, great. I think it would work better if it was practical over CGI, but what do I know?
There are some practical effects in this movie, actually. Like, they do have, like, a giant monster head and giant monster foot at times. But for the most part, when it comes to the full body shots, they're like, oh, yeah, the technology has progressed to the point where we can have a full CGI Godzilla on screen, and it totally won't look bad. We don't want big, fat guys in rubber suits, after all. I'm mad.
It hurts a little bit more because Jurassic Park came out 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And used a combination of CGI and practical effects so well that it still holds up. And it's a little disappointing that they did not do that now. It feels like they were talking to George Lucas a lot. And George Lucas is like, you guys got to go full CGI. Fuck the practical effects. I know I founded the the practical effects studio in Hollywood, but CGI is where it's at now. And they said, okay, George Lucas, good luck on Phantom Menace next year. I'm sure that'll be astonishing.
Yeah. I will say one shot I do love is the fisherman watching in horror as Zilla emerges from the waters. Like, it's a very Jaws kind of shot where you see like the dorsal fins and like the water rising, and then like the dock just starts exploding.
Yeah, that was a fun bit. The old, like, them making fun of the old fishermen for going fishing in the rain, which isn't that when you're supposed to go fishing is in the rain, isn't it? Supposed to be better fish? Yeah. So he goes fishing and he catches Godzilla, which is a fun gag for sure. It's such an, for lack of a better term, it's a very obvious gag, but I love that one. You know what I mean? It's just, it's a great one. And it was a very cool effect.
Very cool effect. And that's the tragedy here is like the first 30 minutes of this movie could be a good movie. Like, I love when Zilla attacks the fishing vessel. I love when Zilla comes out of the dock. It's just as soon as Zilla is revealed, that's where everything starts going downhill and continues to go downhill for a while.
It doesn't look like Godzilla.
No. Zilla does look a bit different than the rest of the Godzillas we've seen before. He's about the size of Showa Godzilla at roughly 177 feet tall. I looked up the height charts, had to convert from the meters and all that. So he's hunched over, though. So he looks more like a dinosaur. He's hunched over with long legs and grabby arms. The main issue, though, is from this point on, Zilla is surrounded by New York skyscrapers. So he looks less like a giant harbinger of destruction and more like an animal trapped in a maze.
So here's where I'm actually going to defend this movie from my heart. The design is not Godzilla, and I wish that they had just done the Godzilla design. I get that you want to put your own mark on it. I don't think that's where you put your mark on it. I think he should have looked more like Godzilla traditionally. However, the idea of him being smaller than all of the skyscrapers and turning, like, they say at one point, they're like, oh my god, this is perfect. Like, he's on an island, he can hide here, he can hunt here. The idea of Godzilla taking over Manhattan and turning that into his personal hunting grounds because he can evade the military and hide in the environment just like an actual animal would, I think that's kind of cool. Like, I like that idea, and it feels like we're giving Godzilla some realism in his mindset, because like, this is the movie that actually talks about what Godzilla wants, that's to eat. And they
I can see why there's parts of this movie that you're a fan of.
I really enjoy that.
It's answering all your questions.
I thought that was cool, and I think that you can still do the metaphor of nuclear annihilation and also having Godzilla act like an actual predator. And the whole point is that we will annihilate ourselves with nuclear weapons. We are apex predators, and we could do our own destruction that way. And Godzilla is apex predatoring the apex predator of the planet now. Like, I think that's cool. I like that concept a lot of him turning Manhattan into his hunting grounds. And it also, you know, I think that still works as a metaphor for our destruction, because he's still making prey out of the rest of us, you know?
I think there is something cool about like a different take on Godzilla, where instead of being this tall, imposing force that is just immune to bullets and missiles and just kind of tanks everything, it is an ambush predator kind of thing, but in the scope of a large city. Like, I do think that it is cool when like the helicopter's going down the street and it's like, where is he? And then Zilla just bashes through a building and eats them, or like comes out from underneath them or something like that. And I think that works for a combat scene. But when the whole movie is like, where's Godzilla? Oh, this giant lizard just disappeared and we have no idea. And then it turns out that he's hidden underneath Manhattan. It's like, one, there'd be a giant hole. Two, there's not enough underneath Manhattan for him to hide in.
Yeah, I think that, like,
there's not enough in the Hudson River for him to swim in.
I'll let you have that. That's true. Like, it works really well for combat because it makes You're right. It works for combat because it gives the combat like stakes, and it explains like Godzilla is allowed to be vulnerable still. Like he's allowed to be hurt by our weapons, which I think he should be. I don't think that he should be invincible, because then you run into the problem of how do we kill Godzilla? And they come up with we trap him in a volcano.
Yeah.
If you can make him bleed, then we can actually fight him and it can go somewhere. But also if he can use the environment to his advantage, like that's great. It's stakes. But yeah, I don't know how he gets the science of him just being all around underneath, and that him fitting in a subway tunnel. I'm like, I don't think he can.
Yeah, no, there would be clues to where he disappeared to.
Buildings would have collapsed. I like him being able to kind of hide, but it doesn't make a lot of sense that he can completely disappear from them, because it just seems a little unrealistic in that regard.
And that's what I'm saying. You could make a novel concept out of a Godzilla that, rather than being tall and tough and slow, having a Godzilla that's quick and fast. And that would work for a fight. Mm-hmm. And maybe if the movie was based in a jungle and then you sort of have like a predator, like, oh, he's hiding in the trees kind of thing, then yeah, you could also kind of work with that. But New York, he can't hide for a prolonged period of time without it becoming stupid. And that's what he does in this movie.
I feel like more skyscrapers would have collapsed from him digging out the foundations underneath them.
Right.
And I suppose the defense would be, well, it's a Godzilla movie. You're not supposed to think about it that deep. However, I think we are. I think the thing about this movie is that it's supposed to be like an action comedy, which making an action comedy out of Godzilla is quite a choice. I'm not sure that you can make an action comedy out of Godzilla.
I think you could totally make an action comedy out of Godzilla. I think the premise itself kind of lends to comedy. It's like, oh, this great disaster is befalling our city. What's the disaster? A giant lizard.
Well, yeah, but considering it's the product of nuclear annihilation, I mean, it just is not, to me, the sort of thing that works tonally very well with comedy. And I feel like there's a lot of action comedy happening in here. Now, of course, I will acknowledge I did find King Kong versus Godzilla to be very funny, and I really liked that movie. I liked that movie more than Kevin did, which does not happen often in this podcast. To me, though, that movie felt like it was kind of satirizing media and society, and this doesn't feel like it's when it's a satire using these incredibly heavy topics, that works better. This film is not attempting to be satirical, it's just attempting to be comedic, which is different. And that's why I think it's not necessarily landing entirely. That's not to say that you can't have jokes in a Godzilla film. Of course, you can have jokes in any movie. But I think that's where we're getting kind of some disconnect, is that I just don't know tonally where exactly this film is supposed to be. And I think a lot of it is just because the people that are creating it, they're not super into Godzilla. And so they're sort of just using the IP to make Independence Day 2.
So more on that later. I gotta cut you off. First, I need to talk about Mayor Ebert. So Zilla is rampaging through New York, and Mayor Ebert and his assistant Gene are holding like a big press conference, like, hey, celebrate your mayor kind of thing. And these bumbling politicians are based off film critics Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel. Apparently, they gave Independence Day a bad review. So Roland Emmerich put them in Godzilla and then did nothing with them.
You know what 90s movie that is very silly that Roger Ebert did love?
What?
The Mummy.
Oh.
Yeah. He said there's like a great, you can look it up, and I'm sure it went viral around the internet or whatever for a while there. But he was basically like, I can't speak to the plot or like, he was basically saying like, this movie, I can't say anything good about it except that I was charmed and delighted the entire time. And people hold this up as an example of like, movies don't need to be necessarily groundbreaking or particularly pretentious, but they can be incredibly entertaining still. And like that's a big point. But I will say I think that The Mummy does a great job with plot and pacing, dialogue, character. Like I think it does a really good job with all of that. It's just also incredibly silly. And to me, The Mummy is one of those like platonic ideals of an incredibly silly, absurd movie that works really, really well.
Yeah. Well, Roger Ebert liked The Mummy. He did not like Independence Day. And so Roland Emmerich was like, how dare he? I shall give him the greatest punishment of all, being in Godzilla 1998. Roger Ebert did comment on this. Like, Gene Siskel called him up and was just like, hey, so how do you feel about Mayor Ebert in this movie? And Roger Ebert was like, I think it's petty, but also I'm disappointed that I wasn't stepped on or eaten or anything like that. Like, nothing happened to our characters.
Roger Ebert was like, I live in your head rent free. Yeah, I agree.
Roger Ebert also, by the way, reviewed Godzilla 1998, and I just kind of want to read the last lines here of his review on RogerEbert.com. Sure. Rest in peace.
Of course.
There is a true sense of wonder in Jurassic Park. Godzilla, by contrast, offers nothing but soulless technique. A big lizard is created by special effects, wreaks havoc, and is destroyed. What a cold-hearted, mechanistic vision, so starved for emotion or wit. The primary audience for Godzilla is children and teenagers, and the filmmakers have given them a sterile exercise when they hunger for dreams.
Damn! Wow. 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 I mean, there's nothing I could say that would top that. Truly. Roger Ebert, one of the greatest to ever do it. Rest in peace, King. Wow. If Emmerich and Dean Devlin find this podcast and listen to it, do you think that that means that we are going to be the bumbling politicians in Godzilla 2 1998 Returns?
Please put me and Kayla in Independence Day 3 and then do nothing with our characters. We're not even shot at by the aliens.
You realize we probably wouldn't be politicians, though. We would be like shitty influencers.
Oh yeah.
As an internet content creator, I dislike the way that many influencers are portrayed in media, but it could be because I don't really follow a lot of those types of influencers, so I'm always just like, what? This isn't what they're like. But it's like I don't follow that side of Instagram, so maybe they are like that.
Well, we'll also have to talk about how this movie portrays journalists, because we go back to great character Audrey. She needs the story, and she thinks that the Zilla story is going to land her career. And honestly, good guess.
Yeah.
So Audrey teams up with cameraman and all-around New York guy Victor in order to film Zilla. Victor...
No, his name is Animal.
No, his nickname is Animal. That's what his workplace calls him. But his real name is Victor.
Yeah, they call him Animal. Cayman, Animal, Roach. What's going on here?
Yep. So Victor almost gets stepped on by Zilla in one of the best parts of this movie, but he just barely threads between Zilla's toes. Still, he got the shot. And to continue her story, Audrey steals her boss's Cayman's press pass.
Nice.
So, the military sweeps in, and they evacuate Manhattan so they can take care of Zilla. One problem. Zilla somehow disappeared.
Somehow, Godzilla disappeared.
So the military decides to bait him out by creating a giant pile of fish. And of course, Dr. Nick has to respond, that's a lot of fish.
That's a lot of fish.
To just silence. The plan works, and Zilla emerges from underground. There is a moment where Dr. Nick comes face to face with Zilla, close enough to touch. It's honestly a peaceful scene as this animal gorges himself on fish. So, of course, the US military has to mess it all up and unload all of their bullets and missiles at Zilla.
Technically the point of it. Technically the plan.
A giant, very noticeably CGI Zilla runs away from the U.S. military. And I swear, the U.S. military does more damage to the city than the giant monster.
Which they call out.
They call out in the movie.
The military is portrayed intentionally as bumbling and kind of ineffective, which is a really interesting choice, I think.
But they are also the heroes at the end of the movie.
They are also still the heroes, which is just an interesting stance to take in these kinds of blockbuster movies where normally the US military is portrayed as like really competent, and if they're not doing well, I mean, they have to be really competent to show how effective and dangerous the monster is, that it is overwhelming the US military. However, usually it's just kind of done in a way of like they're up against, you know, really staggering forces here. But there is a whiff of incompetence in the US military in this film.
A whiff?
A whiff, a stench, a deluge. You know, there's a lot of that going on, which is an interesting choice.
So the scene where the helicopter fires the heat-seeking missiles that can't heat-seek because Zilla is a cold-blooded creature, not how that works.
Yeah.
And then the missiles go completely wide by like a mile and then blow up the Chrysler building.
Uh-huh.
A whiff of incompetence.
Yeah.
When they fire point blank at Zilla and the missiles go wide and they blow up the Flatiron building.
I'll explain the joke. I was underselling it for comedy.
Oh, okay. I was overselling it for comedy there.
Yeah. I think that was a really interesting choice for them to make, because usually big budget blockbusters like this don't do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Independence Day, if I remember correctly, I mean, they're portrayed as very competent and on the ball. So it is interesting that they decided to go with the bumbling military. And I guess maybe they get away with it because the military is still the heroes in the end. And I think that's where I think that's kind of where I'm like, I feel like this film is supposed to be an action comedy because the military is fucking up so dramatically in a way that feels almost like out of character for how the US military is usually portrayed in American disaster films like this.
And we'll get to that in Godzilla 2014.
Yeah, to have them be so bad at it. It feels like it's supposed to be and then you have like the mayor and his assistant who are supposed to be like kind of comedic characters, but aren't that fun, like the bumbling politicians that are yelling at the military. It feels like there's some sort of point that they want to make, but it also feels like maybe they're trying to play it for laughs. And it's one of those things I'm like, it doesn't quite come together for me as something that fully works. It feels like it's trying to do too many things at once / isn't fully committing to either thing. It's just kind of weird.
Well, we're going to add another ingredient into the mix here, Kayla. It's about to get weirder.
Oh, yeah.
Because after Zilla evades the military and disappears again, Dr. Nick makes a startling discovery. Testing some blood samples, he discovers that Zilla is pregnant. That's right. More Manillas, baby.
Congratulations to the father. Mpreg Godzilla.
They make a point of stressing the gender. In the Japanese Godzilla movies, it's a lot of like it's or hims, and then in this movie it's like, no, he is pregnant.
Yeah.
Zilla reproduces asexually, but he is still a he.
Yeah, it's not an agender or bigender creature. It's a male lizard that reproduces asexually, which
born pregnant.
I know that there's born pregnant. There's definitely female lizards that, well, I guess they don't produce asexually because they figured out how to mate with each other. But it's a really interesting, there's some interesting gender stuff happening here. So Mpreg Godzilla, born pregnant.
Yep. And Dr. Nick hypothesizes that he came to New York because that would be a perfect testing ground. So grows in French Polynesia, goes through Panama and Jamaica, swims all the way to Manhattan, because Madison Square Garden is going to... Oh, wait, sorry, spoilers. New York is going to be the perfect nesting ground for this giant radioactive iguana.
Sure. I mean, it's an American-made film, so it has to be New York that we destroy.
But it can't be the military that caused Godzilla. It has to be the French. So we gotta make that journey.
Yeah, the French, it's not the US that created Godzilla, it's the French, but it's the US military that will destroy half of Manhattan attempting to contain Godzilla. Like, there is a lot of collateral damage.
And Dr. Nick is telling the military, like, we have to find this nest or we'll be overrun by Zillas. And the military is strangely enough like, no, we just need to focus on Zilla. This whole nest thing, we don't believe you, scientific expert we brought on this expedition to tell us what to do.
Yeah, it's so, like, why don't you believe him? I don't understand. Like, what? Again, what is going on with the competency of the US government in this film?
It's weird.
Like, it's one thing when it's, if it was being made by the Japanese and meant to be like like, we've talked about how the Japanese films have occasionally portrayed the US government as like bumbling or incompetent because they were flashing back to World War II, so, you know, they were portraying their side as like doing real great.
Saluting Godzillasaurus, our falling soldier.
Yeah, which is, again, and this is all in the context of World War II. So a can of Godzilla worms that we don't need to dig into right now at this moment. But to see an American-made film portraying the U.S. military as both the heroes and as incredibly incompetent is very weird.
Yeah.
And it's not even like it's a situation where there's some sort of corrupt official. I mean, we do end up getting a hero within the military that emerges, you know, as doing the right thing. But he's also kind of portrayed as, like, comedic and bumbling, too.
Yeah.
The colonel.
And normally how these stories go is the institution is shown as bumbling, so that way the individual heroes can save the day.
Yeah.
Like, when the military doesn't listen to Matthew Broderick, I mean Dr. Nick, then that sets up Dr. Nick to save the day himself to show that he was right all along. But even when they find the nest, it's still like, all right, our great plan is to call the military and tell them, hey, you need to bomb here.
Yeah.
We'll get to that later.
Or it's like, if the institution is corrupt, then it's like it's the top brass who are out of touch. They're too busy politicking. And then it's like a couple of like young grunts who are like the real soldiers that, you know, they defy orders to do the right thing, and like that's the heroic and true thing, that, and the top brass is like, never mind, I commend you. You know what I mean? Like, but that's not what is happening here.
There's so many things that could be setups in this movie that are then just static characters.
Yeah.
It's very weird. So here's the deal. Speaking of bad characters, let's talk about Audrey. So Audrey, the love interest, she meets up with her ex-boyfriend, Dr. Nick. And I'll get into some details that you were getting into earlier, Kayla. Mm-hmm. So peppered throughout the film, we learn Dr. Nick dated Audrey for 4 years back when they were in college and protesting. And then he asked her to marry him. And then Audrey then ghosted him, just disappeared. No letter, no nothing. In the present, Dr. Nick says he's still mad about that, because of course, and we then get this exchange. Kayla, do you want to read Audrey's lines here?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll read Dr. Nick.
That was 8 years ago. Some people change.
Most people don't.
Well, I'm sorry you feel that way. Girl. What? What?
This non-apology is enough to get Nick to invite Audrey into his top secret military tent. Like, Nick takes, I'm sorry you feel that way, and he's like, well, I suppose that's a kind of apology, and it's like, no, it's not.
No. It's also, there's so much to unpack here.
Yeah.
Strap in. If you haven't started vacuuming yet, now is a good time. So, many things happening. One, Audrey and Nick were protesting for nuclear disarmament, was what was going on in college.
Yeah.
And then Nick has this whole thing about, like, when we were in college, we were protesting to create awareness, but now I'm working for the Nuclear Commission, or, you know, Department of Energy or whatever, to enact actual change from the inside, which is a very typical, like, neoliberal, very American idea of, like, you join the institution if you want to change it, but it's like, you can't put out a burning house from inside. the house, you know?
The institution that we have just established is no longer listening to you.
Yeah, so interesting. Which, again, not to say that he's wrong necessarily. It's just kind of an interesting little throwaway thing that they put in there that kind of feels like they're like, well, college protesters don't do anything. This is interesting that this is happening in 1998. Wasn't there some sort of big protest happening in the 90s on a lot of, like, by a lot of young people and college students, something about Wall Street, lots of, like, activity in Seattle, you know? And now you have this big budget Hollywood establishment movie coming out and being like, well, it was cute that we were protesting in college, but like, and we created awareness, but we didn't really do anything.
So you're saying this movie would have been made better with the addition of Gabara?
I just almost spit out my coffee. I can't ever take a sip when Kevin is talking because he's gonna get me.
I'm hilarious.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing. Two, the implication here is that Audrey ghosted him because she couldn't commit to him. She didn't want to follow him around while he did his nuclear testing. She wanted to pursue her own dreams of a big journalist in New York. So she turns down this relationship to pursue her career, which does not work out. Meanwhile, he is a successful scientist. So there's a very interesting, whether this is intentional or not, they are making the statement that women who choose pursuing their dreams and their career over a good relationship will not get what they wanted, and she should have married him. Like, that is what is being said here, is he is the one that got away. You turned down a great relationship with a guy who is incredibly desirable to other women, who is successful and smart, for a career that is not working out for you. You are a failure. You are unsuccessful. You have not achieved your dreams. That is what is happening here. And it's really, really interesting to me that this is happening in this film, because this is a pretty similar message that we have gotten in previous Godzilla films, with women who are career orientated, or like criticism against women being career orientated, with women being blamed for latchkey kids, with the telepathic scientist ladies being like, oh yeah, well, once this is all over, I'm going to pursue a family. You should also be into pursuing a family. Like, it's a very common thread that this it's like an example that this level of misogyny exists in Japan and America, which, like, yeah, we know, but to see it in the Godzilla films and then so clearly. And this is just like, to me, when people say that movies aren't political, blockbusters aren't political, popcorn movies aren't political, they are. How is the US government being portrayed? Why is France the creator of Godzilla? Why does Audrey have a failing career and the guy she turned down, the guy she wronged, is doing wonderful in life, and all of the other women, I mean, there's only one other woman in this movie, want him?
Well, that makes me think, why is Elsie Chapman in this film as well? Because she's immediately portrayed as a competent paleontologist that the US government is bringing for this thing.
Yeah.
And like, the first thing that is said about her is like, hey, Dr. Nick, this woman is going to be your boss. And then her first action is to look Matthew Broderick up and down and just be like, hey, you're cute. Do you have a girlfriend? And
yeah,
like, literally those two interactions where she hits on Dr. Nick, and then she has another interaction later on where Dr. Nick says, hey, tell the US military to look for the nest, and that doesn't go anywhere. So it's like, why is she here? Mm-hmm. You know, we do have a female character who is competent at her job, and she does nothing for the plot. And then we have this other female character who is very career oriented, to the point of not only going against her past relationships, but also screwing over Dr. Nick in the present. Oh yeah, I didn't get to that in the summary just yet. You see, Dr. Nick, in the military tent that he brought his ex-girlfriend into, has a tape with all the Godzilla Panama footage, clearly labeled top secret, just laying out in the open. And so, of course, Audrey swipes the tape, and the love interest that we're rooting for not only releases the tape, but she also names Dr. Nick as a source. So directly because of this, Dr. Nick gets fired.
And the thing is this the actions of a bad journalist? Not necessarily. She is doing the journalist thing. This is directly in like opposition to her relationship with Nick, and it makes her, the film is saying she is a bad person for doing this.
But also at the same time, she is the main love
We're
interest
supposed to
that we're
root for
rooting
her.
Yes.
Which is, it's so wild because you get the feeling that maybe it's supposed to be one of those things where it's like she's complicated and we're rooting for like a complex character and there's a lot of nuance, but I don't feel like that is really actually what's happening.
And one other background detail, by the way, is that Nick has multiple photos of him and Audrey together, like set up, implying he set these, like this is a temporary military tent, and he has photos of his relationship from 8 years ago set up here. So does he do this for every temporary workstation?
We saw it in the beginning when he was in Chernobyl with the worms. His like little briefcase thing had pictures of her.
Oh my God.
He is still hung up on her and carries multiple photos of her everywhere he goes with him. Meanwhile, she seems like she's not actually that broken up over him.
She directly screws him over.
And the movie is telling us that she does still like him. She should still like him. Like, it's so weird and all over the place. So you're just like, oh, so Audrey is like just using him. And honestly, if Audrey was just using him, baller character move.
Yeah.
Like, what an interesting concept to introduce this character that is is straight up using Nick to step on him and get to her own career, make her own career out of this. The fact that she's supposed to still be in love with him though and ends up with him in the end makes it all very weird, because it's like, that is a betrayal.
If the movie ended with Audrey being like, sorry, Nick, just as you have to go to Chernobyl to look at radiation's effects on worms, so too do I need to do whatever I need to in order to become a journalist, just as the US military had to do whatever it could to take down Zilla. Then you have a theme. But unfortunately,
any means necessary.
Unfortunately, this was not made by a competent writer. I'm coming for you.
That was not the theme that was not the theme we were going for. So it's just, it feels, so much of this movie ends up feeling like it is happening because they need it to happen instead of it's happening organically.
Mm-hmm.
From Godzilla can hide underground in Manhattan and it doesn't cause any buildings to collapse into their foundation, to Audrey is a calculating, a diabolical bad bitch, and yet still winds up with Nick, who she screwed over multiple times, and who he is still hung up on her.
Roger Ebert is a bumbling politician, but also he's entirely reasonable.
Yeah.
The U.S. military are a bumbling force, but they are also the heroes in the end. Audrey is a career-focused woman, but she is also the love interest that gets together with Dr. Nick at the end.
Yeah.
There's so much of this movie that just doesn't make sense.
Mayor Ebert is incredibly reasonable, actually.
Yeah.
Because he's yelling at the U.S. military for blowing up the Chrysler building.
Yeah.
And he's also, when they're like, he disappeared, he's like, I evacuated Manhattan for no reason. Like, you don't even know where Godzilla is. This evacuation could cost millions of dollars, and we're not even sure that it was necessary. Like, these are realistic, reasonable things. He's not portrayed like the mayor in Jaws, where he is straight up ignoring the problem or trying to cover it up or not addressing with it. Like, he still evacuated the city. Like, he's holding the government to task, and the movie is, he's holding the military to task, and the movie is backing up that the military is handling this incompetently. So the movie's actually backing up Ebert while still trying to be like, he's a bumbling politician. I will say it is very funny where Gene is like the incompetent assistant, and Ebert is constantly like, why do I keep you around? Like, Ebert will be like, Gene will be like, I don't know what's going on. And Ebert's like, well, what else is new? You know, very funny, very interesting. Are they trying to say that Gene Siskel is secondary and unnecessary to Roger Ebert? Like,
trying to drive a wedge between them? Like,
drive a wedge between them?
Speaking of driving wedges between two people, Dr. Nick does confront Audrey about stealing the top secret footage and naming him directly as a source and getting him fired with the U.S. military. And when she's confronted about it, Audrey says, Well, you didn't say it was off the record.
Jesus. Have a spine, woman.
No apologies. No apologies given this whole movie. So
She can be a calculating, cold-hearted bitch to get that story.
So stick
but
with
they
that
won't let her
characterization.
be a calculated. They won't do it. It's like well, they tell us when we meet her. They tell us immediately she's such a sweetie heart, and she's so like timid, and she's not cut out for New York because it's dog eat dog. And then like they're like, you got to be dog eat dog. So this is why she does this. Like this is why she screws Nick over, is because her fancy New York journalist friends told her you got to be harder. But like she won't lean into that, and she won't. It's like, well, you didn't say it off the record. You're not taking responsibility for your actions here. I just want characters to take responsibility for their actions. And I know that like people in real life don't necessarily take responsibility for their actions, but I'm also not watching. I don't like watching movies about realistic people. Real people that I want to be friends with are not people I want to watch movies about. I want to watch movies about people that are like interesting and complicated and contradictory and mean. Like characters that I like to watch in TV are not necessarily characters I want to be friends with, because I want to be friends with people that are like well adjusted.
Or just have a consistent through line with their characterization.
Yeah. I also realized I accidentally said like, I implied that I'm not friends with interesting people in that sentence. That's incorrect. I am friends with interesting people. I just mean to say the types of people that you like watch movies about are usually like fucked up. Like the characters in almost any sitcom are terrible people that I would not want to be friends with, but they're entertaining to watch. So yeah, I don't like, it's just ugh.
And unfortunately for Audrey, this backstabbing doesn't even work because her boss, Charles Kamen, just takes the story for himself and just edits out all of her bits.
Yeah.
And he even mispronounces the name as Godzilla instead of Gojira.
Mm-hmm.
They make a point of that in the movie. It's like, it's Gojira, you bumbling idiot.
Yeah.
So Audrey still needs a story for her big break.
Interesting that the movie told Audrey to do this, and then it doesn't work out for Audrey.
Amazing. So throughout the movie, French secret agent Philippe Roche has been watching the situation. He then kidnaps Dr. Nick and brings him to his hideout, where he recruits Dr. Nick to help find the nest. So he's set up as like this imposing force watching in the background, and at this point in the movie, it's like, oh, he's the only one with a head screwed onto his shoulders. So together, they break into a military installation, all thanks to Agent Roche chewing gum and doing an Elvis Presley impression to sound American.
There's also a bit earlier in the movie when they're like in a disguised UPS truck, where this one of the soldiers, one of the French soldiers, comes in with coffees and a bag of donuts, and Roach insults the coffee, and he pulled out a donut and he's like, no croissant? And the soldier is like, no. As if it, like, the implication is either that there are no croissants at this donut shop, which is horrifying, or that the croissants at this donut shop are terrible and not worth getting. All of the jokes surrounding Roche are, he's French. Because French is the comedy nationality to Americans.
God.
And that's why my theory of this is supposed to be an action comedy, that's where it comes from. Like that's why they had to have the French create Godzilla, because they needed a French guy to have the comedy, to have these jokes.
And this guy gets more quirks and interesting characterization than the main character, which is very funny to me.
Yeah. I want to follow him.
Well, here's the thing. Every time we say, hey, let's follow the character with agency, we get a movie where the character with agency is the main character, and then it sucks. Remember?
Yeah.
Terror of Mechagodzilla?
I don't know what I'm gonna say it again. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When do I get to watch Shin Godzilla?
Later. So we cut over to another Zilla chase through the streets, and there's a point where there's like a dozen helicopters that are like 4 feet from each other, just swarming around, all digital CGI-like, chasing after Zilla again.
There's no way they would not crash into each other.
It's
Helicopters
so funny.
are held together by duct tape and hope. They defy the laws of physics and aerodynamics constantly. They're so dangerous.
Zilla does a dive into the Hudson. He then takes on 2 submarines, and while he manages to destroy one of them, the other lands direct hits with their torpedoes. Seemingly killed, Zilla sinks into the ocean. By the way, I looked into this. The Hudson River, not deep enough for this action scene, but, you know, there's a lot that I'm suspending my disbelief for this movie. I'm already suspending it a whole lot with Zilla could hide in the endless underground tunnels underneath Manhattan. So at this point, my disbelief is getting really stretched.
Not being big enough or being too big.
Okay, one problem solved. Now for the other one. Dr. Nick and the French journey into the tunnels underneath New York. Audrey and her cameraman Victor also follow them. Eventually, they make their way to Madison Square Garden, where they find Zilla has laid over 200 eggs within the stadium. And then, the eggs hatch. Hey, remember Jurassic Park, that movie that was made by a competent director? Well, hope you like a worse version of the raptor scene. Our human heroes run from the hundreds of mini-Zillas. They break into the Madison Square Garden broadcast control room and send out a live message so that way Audrey can be a reporter with the story. They give the live broadcast, hey, the stadium is filled with mini-Zillas. U.S. military, please bomb this place now. Kill these babies before they take over the earth.
Once again, interesting. The U.S. military to be bombing babies. Let's not read into this and what they may accidentally or intentionally be saying.
Yeah, and Audrey gets her dream as well. She backstabbed the main character, but we're forgetting about that. Dr. Nick is very forgiving.
Yes. It's interesting also. I do say, there is something that I really like about this, actually, and it is that they are saying, if we don't destroy Madison Square Garden and all of these mini Godzillas, we're going to get 200 big Godzillas that could annihilate, or at least, if not completely annihilate, then really cause a lot of destruction to humanity.
And they're born pregnant.
Yeah, and they're born pregnant. So it's like, we are facing a potential extinction event, existential crisis, etc. You have to bomb it. We are also here.
Yeah.
You still have to bomb it. And that is a self-sacrifice that we have not seen in a lot of Godzilla movies. Now, spoilers, they get away. They don't actually have to sacrifice their lives. However, they are willing to do it and say to do it, and they're going to do it. And I really, really appreciate that level of, like, conviction, because we have not gotten, we keep saying from the very beginning Godzilla, we are chasing the high of Serizawa's sacrifice. But this film is kind of the closest we have gotten to the sacrifice.
We don't hang on it, though. That's the thing. Like, none of them, like, look at each other and be like, the only way we can save the world is if we sacrifice. Like, they all kind of have this idea that once the military gets the message, they'll be able to get out of there if they run for it. And they have 6 minutes
even though
escape.
they already tried to get out of there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there is, like I said, there's never a moment where they, like, look into each other's eyes, especially Dr. Nick and his love interest, Audrey, and maybe apologize to each other or realize their mistakes or understand that life is precious. But still, it's like, well, we have to do this. So if we have to sacrifice ourselves, so be it. No, we don't actually hang on any of that.
Which is disappointing.
Very disappointing.
That we have this wonderful emotional beat in this film that has so far seemed allergic to emotions. And they, once again, they watch that significant moment of very real humanity that a lot of people could relate to and ponder of, like, would I do that if I was in that situation? Would I be brave enough to do that? They see that moment, the whole crux that this film could hang on, and they let it go by.
Yep. Don't do anything with it. A running theme in this movie. Also, another running theme of this movie is tonal whiplash, because these mini-Zillas, they're about like 9 feet tall, and there's dozens of them. So they're a terrifying force throughout the film. We see them eat some of the French.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
Incredible. And then after they do the live broadcast, it's like, okay, we have 6 minutes to get out of here before this place is bombed. So they're running through the halls. They're being chased by the Zillas. And then, to evade them, Dr. Nick spills over a bunch of basketballs and a gumball machine. And the mini Zillas slip on all the balls like it's a goddamn Looney Tune.
I told you, because it's an action comedy, because this film is supposed to be an action comedy.
I'm honestly surprised they didn't dub in that, like, whoop, 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 whoop sound effect while they were, like, slipping on all the balls.
Missed opportunity.
There's also a bit where they move across a lobby that's, like, filled with dozens of mini-Zillas, and they do that by, like, shooting down 3 chandeliers, and there's no clear reason why that keeps all these hungry mutant baby raptors back. But that's, like, the best thing that they can come up with to keep them away for, like, seconds as they make their way across this lobby.
Maybe it's supposed to be, like, it scares them?
Well, the thing is, like, sometimes the mini-Zillas are scared by lights, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes the doors stop them, and sometimes they can break through them in an instant. Sometimes they can slip on all the balls, and sometimes they can just trample right through like a popcorn machine. Like, the strength and tenacity of these mini-Zillas is dependent on what keeps the humans alive in this scene. Yes, yeah. Exactly.
We talked about how the theme of this movie could have been by any means necessary. This film is moving forward by any means necessary.
Yeah.
Which, this is something that is in a lot of Godzilla movies, actually. So in many ways, Godzilla 1998 is a very Godzilla franchise movie.
A behind-the-scenes fact, by the way. So there's a scene where Dr. Nick is in the elevator, and then one of the mini-Zillas breaks its head through the doors as he's, like, trying to get away. Not on purpose. They mistimed the animatronic, and because the animatronic was a giant robot, it went right through the doors, and Dr. Nick's scream of fear is real.
It's not a Godzilla movie if something doesn't go terribly wrong with a special effect in a dangerous way. See, this is what I'm saying. This movie is a Godzilla franchise movie in so many on point ways.
And in so many other ways, it's like this isn't Godzilla. There was a point in this movie where I was like, man, if they just branded this as an original monster, like if this was just, here's a big mutant T-Rex named Evil Clifford, and it's attacking the city, then you could have a competent movie here. But also the movie itself is not competent, so I swiped that thought away.
Yeah, on the design of the and I think I mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but it's taking us 3 to 5 business years to film this podcast. The design of the monster is really cool. I think it's badass and awesome.
Controversial opinion in this fandom.
I don't like that it's a Godzilla movie and it doesn't look like Godzilla, though.
There we go.
I think that I said that earlier. I think it should have just looked like Godzilla. I think it looks cool, but you're making a Godzilla movie. Just make it look like Godzilla. There can be good subversions, and there are some subversions that are betrayals. This felt more like betrayal than subversion. And that's a hard line to walk in a lot of franchise movies, because some fans are going to be okay with it and some fans aren't. This looks like there's a big consensus in the fandom on this one. And I usually like to commend big swings. But yeah, this is one where I'm going to side with the fandom. I think it should have just looked like, even though it is a really cool design, I still think it should have just been Godzilla.
There's a YouTube channel, Pointless Hub, that was covering this movie. And in that video, they made a point of saying that this design of Godzilla would actually make a good Wario for Godzilla.
Oh my god.
And that, like if you made a movie where Godzilla faces this creature, and not counting the movie where that happens later on, but we'll get to that. But you could make a movie, another Godzilla versus his doppelganger movie, where you have tall and slow and strong Godzilla against short and fast and kind of weak Zilla. And he also has all these babies. So now you have Godzilla fighting against like 200 mini Zillas, which would also be cool. Like you could have something there of like opposites, but the same fighting each other. But because...
like the T-Rex versus Indominus Rex?
Exactly. But because Roland Emmerich thinks that 2 giant monsters fighting is boring and he can't understand why kids are into that. Anyway.
See, the thing is, when I talked about at the beginning of this podcast, when I said that I didn't want to just like shit talk a movie made by people that could potentially hire me one day because it's bad manners. It's a little hard because it seems like they didn't really want to make this movie.
No. Well, and that's the thing. I'm taking their words.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'm taking the words that they said in official interviews after they were given the helm of a major franchise.
Yeah.
And I'm reading those words out again. That's what I'm doing.
Like, if they were clearly like so passionate about Godzilla and then still made this movie, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But it almost seems like they didn't actually want to make a Godzilla movie and they did it anyway. And then it's like full of holes and doesn't even satisfy or pander to the Godzilla fan base because they wanted to do their own version of Godzilla. And I don't, if you wanted to do your own version of Godzilla, then you should have just done an original giant monster movie. I mean, Independence Day was an original film. This is the 90s. IP isn't quite king yet. You probably could have done an original monster film.
Yeah. So, the humans escape the stadium before it's bombed. Hooray! Zilla's dead, the nest is destroyed, and we got a huge explosion that the main characters dived away from without looking at it, because cool people don't look at explosions. We got the shot. Dr. Nick and Audrey even kiss for no reason. So surely, at the 1 hour and 53 minute mark, we are done with this movie, right?
Yeah, it's not the 2010s or 2020s. We don't have 3.5 hour long movies yet, Kevin. Only the Titanic is the exception.
We're not done with the movie yet. Zilla's still alive, and he is pissed about all of his babies being blown up. Understandable.
Mm-hmm.
Our heroes climb into a taxicab and drive away with Zilla in hot pursuit. The chase goes on for far too long before they bring Zilla to the Brooklyn Bridge and tangle him up in the suspension cables. The U.S. military then heroically saves the day by bombing this scared animal after killing all of its young. But don't worry, we do get a scene of Dr. Nick looking into Zilla's eyes as he dies, and then Dr. Nick immediately shrugs it off to put his arm around his love interest and walk into a crowd of cheering New Yorkers with inappropriate victory violin music. You've seen Independence Day, you know the music. And everyone's celebrating.
Like Miki before him. This movie fits in with every other fucking Godzilla movie.
Sacrilege. Heresy. Blasphemy.
I know. I'm just saying.
So
I'm calling it like I see it.
So the Frenchman Philippe Roche takes this moment to swipe Victor's camera, or specifically the tape from his camera, and he tells Dr. Nick over the phone that he'll return the footage after he removes a few items from it, which I don't think there's a whole lot you can remove from the Zilla tape while still keeping the French government's involvement of the creation of Zilla out of it. I don't think he's going to return that tape.
It's interesting that the French government's culpability in the creation of this giant monster is still secret.
Right. So the day is saved, but within the fires of the destroyed Madison Square Garden, it is revealed there is one egg left, and it hatches. And originally, we were going to have 2 other movies after this, but this movie bombed, so this is only important for the Fox Kids cartoon series. And then we cut to credits on the song Come With Me by P. Diddy, made for this film, and somehow that's not the worst thing that aged in this movie.
What a film. What a film that was both very in line with many other Godzilla movies and yet a betrayal of Godzilla.
This movie is trying to have its cake and eat it too, in that it's a lot of things are 2 separate things that try to exist at the same time, and it just creates a really long, like 2 hour and 18-minute movie that makes you feel like you wasted your time.
It is quite a film. Now I see some of these fun facts are about the product placement here. And the product placement in this film, on point, all over the place. Love how many ads were happening in the movie. Felt very true to a 90s American Godzilla film.
You got the Blockbuster sign in Madison Square Garden. You got all these people eating Wheaties.
It became like a sport to me in many ways, because it was just so obvious that this was how they funded that movie.
This movie is famous for how much was put into marketing it. Like 150 million from, like, this is their official source. It's like a video that TriStar put out. 150 million was spent on advertising and promotion. So adjusting
what was the budget?
I don't know off the top of my head, but adjusting to inflation, that's about 289 million today. I can actually look up the Godzilla
That's
1998 budget real quick.
Traditionally, the marketing budget is 50 to 100% of the film's budget.
Okay.
Closer to 100% these days. Sometimes it's bigger. And that's why the profitability of movies, like, they don't need to just make back their budget. They also need to make back the marketing budget and then some, which is why we have a lot of issues, because nowadays it seems like every movie, you either make a movie for $10 million or you make a movie for $250 million, and then you spend another $250 million to advertise it. So now every movie, every big blockbuster movie needs to make $500 million just to break even. And it's causing like a huge issue with the economics of Hollywood, because you have all of these movies that simply are like, they can't make back these budgets because their budgets are so bloated. And then also ticket prices are really expensive. And we're kind of in a depression, recession situation. People aren't affording to go to the movie theater, and the movie theaters aren't lowering ticket price. It's like a whole fucking thing. This is where it started.
Yeah. So from quick Googles, the numbers are varying, but it's basically between like 125 million to like 150 million was the budget of the film.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and according to Wikipedia, the movie grossed 379 million worldwide. So it made its money back.
But it wasn't profitable.
Most of it in the initial ticket sales. That was the thing. There was a huge marketing blitz. Taco Bell did commercials where the Taco Bell dog interacted with Zilla. There was toys that were launched, but they were trying to keep the design of Zilla secret. So a lot of those toys didn't get put onto the shelves until after the movie came out. And then one of the major toy making companies went bankrupt because of it, because of course no one liked the movie, so the toys weren't flying off the shelves.
Buy the toys, yeah.
And the main promotional tagline for this film, where Godzilla is shorter than he is in the Heisei era, is "Size does matter."
Really interesting that the tagline was a sexual innuendo. For again, my theory that this movie was supposed to be an action comedy, because why would the tagline be a funny sexual innuendo if it wasn't supposed to be an action comedy? That is what they were going for. They missed the target, I would say.
Well, screenwriter Dean Devlin would disagree with you on that, as he was also famous for getting into arguments with fans on Godzilla internet forums. One response...
never gonna work.
One response on the Godzilla.com internet forums he gave was, quote, "Our movie did what it was supposed to do. We're all happy about it. If you don't like that, to hell with you." So, Kayla, every time you say that this movie was trying to be an action comedy, but it didn't perform that, Dean Devlin is directly telling you, go to hell.
Nobody send this to Dean Devlin, please. I want to have a career.
To be fair, years later, Dean Devlin did walk back some of these comments that he made on official Godzilla internet forums about his movie.
Listen, okay, here's the thing.
He did admit some of his mistakes.
I will, and that's very big of him, I will say, to the end of my days, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. You simply do not devote sleepless nights, years of your life, that much money to making a bad movie. Almost every time when you make a movie, you're swinging, hoping that it's going to end up being something that people like, that it's going to end up being good. That's what happened with every other Godzilla movie. It's what happened with every other movie, any TV show, and it's what's happening now. Like, I remember I was like talking to my brother the other day, and he said something like, "I don't understand how bad movies get made." And like, when you're in it, you don't always, it doesn't, until it all comes together, you don't even necessarily know that it's going to be good. Infamously, the first cut of Star Wars was trash. Steven Spielberg had to take George Lucas aside and was like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, this sucks. And it could have died in the water. Fox didn't believe in it. And then they saved it in the edit. Marsha Lucas got in there and reorganized some stuff and saved the movie. If it was what George Lucas had initially cut together, it would have bombed. Marsha saved it. And then we saw later, in the prequels, George Lucas had unfettered control, and a lot of people are like, nobody wanted to say no. Mm-hmm. Nobody wanted to tell him no like they did in the originals. And then a lot of people trashed the prequels for not being as good as the originals, for having bad dialogue, etc., etc. George didn't set out to do that. Like, they did not set out to make a movie that would piss everybody off. They really did try. It's interesting that they didn't seem to love Godzilla and they made this movie, but everybody's got, but you got to get paid. That's a big goose egg.
That's the thing, though. I've stated in the previous episodes, some of these Godzilla movies are bad, and a lot of it is because of rushed production timelines, executive meddling. The budget just wasn't there. I understand all of that. This specific movie, they negotiated complete creative control over a major franchise and said in multiple interviews that they did not understand the Godzilla franchise. They did not respect the people that were working within the suits. They didn't want to portray him as a monster, but as an animal. And even on that last line, I could see some working around with that. But all of these official statements of them just saying, we do not understand this franchise, and now we are in a place where we have complete creative control over it and a budget to use incredible CGI and effects, and then they put this out, and that's why I'm mad.
Yeah, I don't understand why, if you're not passionate about Godzilla, but you're going to make a Godzilla movie for the money, then I don't understand why you would want complete creative control.
Yeah.
If you're doing this film for the money, which many people in Hollywood work on projects for the money, I would argue that is the lion's share of what's actually getting made is people doing it for the money. That doesn't mean that the movie ends up being bad. Oftentimes the movie ends up being really good. So my question is, why would you negotiate for complete creative control if you weren't really that passionate about Godzilla and you're just doing it for the money? Why not say like, okay, here's our rubric. Here is a movie that matches like what you want it to be. Like, why are you, if you don't care about it, then why are you against any sort of executive meddling? Like, allow yourself to be commissioned.
Because, Kayla, it's the same reason that they put Mayor Roger Ebert in there. It's the same reason Dean Devlin went onto the official Godzilla forums to argue with fans. Because Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin are auteurs that no one should get in the way of, and anyone who cannot see their vision, they're wrong.
I don't love the auteur theory of filmmaking because it's a collaboration, and I have maintained this since I was in film school. It's a collaborative medium. It's a group project.
I agree with you.
If you want complete creative control, you should do novels, not TV.
So, one last thing before we move on. The rights to this version of Godzilla were later purchased back by Toho, and then they officially named him Zilla afterward. And the reasoning for this was commented on by director Ryuhei Kitamura of Godzilla Final Wars, which Zilla will return in Godzilla Final Wars. But the director of that movie, Ryuhei Kitamura, stated, this was because this version took the god out of Godzilla.
They're not wrong. Well, that's a wild sentence.
So, Kayla, what are we watching next?
We didn't rate this.
Oh, right. 1 star.
I don't want to.
Go on, tell our biggest fan, Dean Devlin, what you think of Godzilla 1998, Kayla.
These ratings are arbitrary, and they don't really mean anything. And
Kayla's watching her dreams of writing for Leverage disappear before her eyes.
Next, we'll be watching the first 2 episodes of
you
Godzilla
coward.
the Series.
You absolute coward. Put a star on there. Put it on the record.
fine. Like, every other Godzilla movie I've watched since, like, Biollante and King Kong versus Godzilla and the original, 2.5 stars.
What are we watching next?
Well, you have to rate it.
I did. 1 star. I don't like this movie. It sucks.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna get roasted for giving it 2.5 stars. He'll never see this. Next, we'll be watching the first 2.
Dean Devlin furiously typing in our YouTube comments. I was here the whole time. Kayla,
I need everybody to be really cool. I need everybody to be really cool. All of you, be really cool about this episode, please. Next, we'll be watching the first 2 episodes of Godzilla the series, the Fox Kids cartoon. If you liked this podcast, be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, leave a comment, and share with a friend. Follow us on social media. We got the links in the show notes. We also have a Ko-fi. You can support us there and get access to cool bonus content like extra episodes and access to the private Discord where you can talk with other geeks about Godzilla and all things Digital Kaiju. Check it out! Gorilla Whale is a production of Digital Kaiju Studios. It is hosted and produced by Kevin Carpenter and Kayla Knudsen. Gorilla Whale has no official affiliation with Toho, Legendary, or any other companies associated with the Godzilla franchise. We thank you for watching along with us. Until next time, watch out for kaiju.
Watch out for kaiju and Dean Devlin. We know you're our biggest fan.
I was going to say that, but then I didn't say it because I was like, no, I don't want him to be mad at me, hypothetically.